For this episode, it is my pleasure to be joined by subscription expert Ben Fisher. Ben is the co-founder and technical CEO of Rodeo, a consumer-centric subscription platform for challenger consumer packaged goods brands. As one of the leading names in the subscription space, Ben also hosts Subscription Radio, a podcast dedicated to understanding the nuts and bolts of subscription commerce. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's like we should rename my title to anti-subscription expert.
I know all the listeners are going to be like, I'm intrigued. What's going on here? Which actually, to kick off the whole conversation and jump into that, I'm curious. I always like to know, kind of like set the context, learn the background of my guests, things like that. So maybe we start this off by learning your interest and what brought you to the world of subscriptions, and then maybe what turned you into the anti-subscription person.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's like I'll do the substantially abbreviated version of this. So because it has absolutely nothing to do with subscriptions.
Love it.
But I grew up on a tree farm in Midcoast, Maine, and my first business was actually at an elementary school. There was a strawberry patch like near my home, and I used to pick strawberries and sell them door to door in a little wheelbarrow. And I had actually created, my mom still has it, a copy of my business card that I designed.
That's so funny.
It was the Strawberry Man. And
nice.
So, but what was funny is I would use the money to buy computer books to learn JavaScript and HTML. And so this is probably around 4th or 5th grade. And it's like one of those weird things where it's like, I was like, I'm a fairly well-adjusted adult considering I started like reading programming books at such a young age. Like I look at my parents and I'm like, weren't you like, what is this kid doing? But like, I guess the point there is I've always been super interested in creating things that exist, like that are bigger than me. And I'm an only child, so I also had a lot of time by myself. And so I think a lot of those, combine those things, and I grew up on a tree farm. You combine all of those things, and I had a lot of time.
Quite the triple whammy there.
Right? And I guess what made me relatively normal is I did play sports. So at least I had that. I still had, and I was a skateboarder and snowboarder. And so, I would say like going over looking back on the course of my life, I was having a conversation with someone the other day where it's like a lot of what I do, and this is the last aside I'll do. So I also am like very much into freestyle hip hop and like hip hop culture. I was a freestyle, so I joke, I was a professional freestyle rapper for a bit.
No way.
Not a very good one, but yeah, I was in a group, and so I still do it today, like these days. So like, if I really want to scare the crap out of myself and just do something. But when I look at so a lot of the skills I developed over the years were in design and programming. And when I look at like mixtapes and hip hop culture and things that I really enjoy about even music, I'm not a musician, but like I've always done a lot of it's around like taking something that already existed and adding a little bit of flavor or a little bit of style and making it feel new or making it fun. Like taking something that's like really freaking boring or monotonous and like find a way to make it cool and fun to do or make it slightly delightful and surprising. And so for me, that is product design. And that's a lot of what I love. And so, I'd say like as a professional, as an adult, I started off working in advertising as a Flash developer before Steve Jobs killed Flash. And I was like a designer and programmer working in advertising. And then I like launched digital products on the side. And eventually they started working. And so I was able to stop the freelancing and working with agencies. But I'd say about 9 years ago, I got really interested and focused on building products that help e-commerce entrepreneurs make more money. Because that, I think for any entrepreneur, like one of the early challenges that's really fundamental to whether or not your business will succeed is, will people pay you money for it? And I will say that I was like several of my earlier businesses after college were really good ideas. Like they're still really good ideas, probably really bad businesses. But one of the things I wanted to do was I will at least want to focus in like a playground where there's money. Right. Like where I can like run around and like hit walls and like knock myself out. But as long as I'm not like a complete idiot, that there's still like a business model in here. And so for me, it's really been focused on how can I create what I would describe as like superpowers for e-commerce entrepreneurs. And, you can get really technical where now it's CPG and they're selling non-perishable products. But at the end of the day, like what I care about is creating really cool things that help people make more money.
That's awesome.
And so I don't know if that's helpful or if it mimics like the sort of
No,
the story that people have said before, but that's
everyone has different stories and I love it.
Yeah.
That's
So
the best part of introductions. That's awesome. And so how did this all come together to where you are right now, which is Rodeo?
So as I mentioned, I started focusing on the e-commerce space as a place to build products. And about 9 years ago, I co-founded a company called CartHook. Yep. And we were early in the Shopify space. So this is prior to Shopify being public. And Shopify was just one of our several integrations. And what we noticed was there were a lot of digital marketers moving from ClickFunnels who were, now that this idea of drop shipping had come about, there were all these digital marketers who were really struggling to profitably acquire customers on Shopify because they didn't have the typical tools that they would use as marketers. And one of those big ones is you offer something for less upfront, like you have this hero product, and then you make your profit or your break even through post-purchase upsells. And at the time, Shopify didn't even have that concept. And so we came up with a solution, and we're really early into Shopify. And over the course of about 6 years, grew that into a substantial business and then eventually sold the company. But that really, I'd say around that time, subscriptions became popular in e-commerce. So one of the early subscription companies I remember is like Birchbox and BoxyCharm. Those were really much like box of the month. And then around, I don't know honestly what year it is off the top of my head, like what year this started, but I remember around the time that we were building CartHook, CPG brands in particular and Shopify got into subscriptions, like offering their products as a subscription. So it no longer was just, it's a rotating box of trial products that you're subscribing to. Is instead like, hey, I sell like a 6-pack of coffee. I will mail that to you every single month. And so that, like, a lot of our customers at CartHook also sold subscriptions. And so, and I think appropriately, as an entrepreneur who's built B2B SaaS companies, like I've been dealing with subscriptions as a business model for most of my entrepreneurial life, churn and retention and expansion revenue. Like I totally get it. And it's a space that I also have a lot of experience with just as someone who runs a subscription-based business, although it's software, which is, I'll say in some really fundamental ways, very different than what people are trying to do around subscriptions with physical products, because the physical world has a lot of its own challenges, especially when you deal with subscriptions.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Okay, so, and then with Rodeo right now, what is the main function of your role there? And like, what do you focus on a day-to-day?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and CEO. I kind of joked I'm the technical CEO because both my partner and I, we are both engineers.
Nice. Okay.
But he's a much better engineer than me. And so, no, Joel's amazing. And so, my day-to-day is really focused around, product development, sales, marketing, podcasts. So talking here, and then we have our podcast that I'm typically on interviewing people. So a lot of my role is talking to merchants and really trying to understand like what are their challenges and understanding how we can help.
No, that's awesome. And I think something that's really hard about subscriptions, in my point of view, from the customer side of things, is that just like you said, all these different brands are bringing on subscriptions now. So I think maybe the last 5 or 6 products I've purchased, whether it was hair care, skincare, this, that, whatever, have been subscription models. And it's driving me a little insane at this point because it's just too much of this one model being thrown at me as a customer, where it's obviously marketed in a certain way. And maybe it works for some people, but then in my head, it's also scary to subscribe to that time and time again, because what if I forget my next month, if I don't want to use it anymore, or something like shampoo where they suggest every month or every 3 months, and that's not enough time for me, whatever it may be. But I'm curious to know, I'm sure with all your years of experience of working in subscriptions and expansion revenue and things like that, you must have heard so many roller coaster stories and potentially horror stories about businesses trying to get into the subscription. So I guess first thing kind of breaking into this space in my random set of questions is, how should a business decide if they should be subscription based or not? Like, how do they make that decision?
So before I answer that, I want to ask you, so did you buy from all those companies?
Yes.
Did you buy it? Was there an option to buy it one time and there was also a subscription option, or was there only a subscription option?
I would say for 4 out of 6 of those, there was an option for one time or subscribe and save, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you buy the subscription version of all of them though, even when they had the option for one time?
I think for two of them, I bought the one time, and the rest I did subscribe for about 2-ish months.
Yep.
One product, I stayed with them for, actually, I've spoken about it on a previous podcast. Don't know if the company will ever hear that. Hopefully not. But I think I stayed with them for maybe a year, and then I switched to another subscription brand. But this new one that I'm subscribing to is actually the shampoo example, where normal people go through shampoo maybe in about 3 to 6 months. It takes me like 9 months to get through a shampoo. So
wow.
That's what I was talking about. But yes, to answer your question, kind of a mix of the two.
And I'm curious, are there so how many subscriptions do you currently have like active off the top of your head?
Including my TV subscriptions?
No, I'm just saying like physical subscriptions.
Okay, physical.
Not media.
I think just 2 at the moment. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think that is what you described, and even what you just said around it feels like everyone's offering you a subscription. The short answer is they are. I think the last stat I saw is around 70% of D2C brands on Shopify offer a subscription.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I say that not to like, so a few things I think are important to say. Like there's as an entrepreneur and someone who builds like SaaS companies, like recurring revenue is amazing. It's fantastic. And, even in like the B2B SaaS world, there are like challenges around churn and like how do you like retain customers? But like this idea of predictable revenue is built into software as a service. If you're dealing with physical products, the problem is like consumption rarely matches the replenishment interval. And that leads to a really bad user experience. Mm-hmm. And so, a couple things are happening. Like early on when subscriptions were introduced, and this lasted for a while, it was like subscriptions were an innovative unlock for brands. Yeah. Like brands over and over again were having to like just sell direct response through email marketing. This idea of recurring revenue and subscriptions was amazing. And for a lot of consumers, it was in fact useful. Problem is now every brand is doing it. And you combine that with some of like the very real limitations of subscriptions in the real world of like your lifestyle. And now that we're post-COVID, I assume I can say that we're post-COVID, where like people are traveling and like going outside, like your lifestyle gets in the way, whether it's like you're not consuming things as though you're locked in your house and all you have is the things that are like the rations that are with you.
Yep.
And I say that as someone living in New York City during COVID. It was like I had rations and I had the things in the house and I ate them and I didn't go anywhere. Now I'm a human being again, right? And so, that is too much product is the number one reason people cancel subscriptions. And so when I look at just the emphasis, and I talk to brands all the time, as I was saying, like the number one priority for a lot of brands is to get more of their customers into a subscription cadence. And I think the actual question should be, first off, is my product a good experience as a subscription? I think the second piece of that's connected is what value can I provide outside of me just sending more product? Whether that's like, is there a membership piece? Is there some sort of extra benefit outside of just more product and maybe that discount you mentioned, like the subscribe and save? Because just trying to attract people into your discount or into your subscription through a discount is like, we know in business, like if all you're using as the carrot is the discount and you're competing on price, like that's a really challenging losing battle. Like people love discounts and they are a good way to like kind of lead to impulse purchases, but you need to use it selectively and strategically. And ultimately, people are not going to subscribe for a year because they're getting 10% off. Yeah, it's just not true. Like, and I'm just looking around my apartment right now and I'm like, I have one subscription and most of the D2C operators I talk to have like maybe one. A lot of them don't have any.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting to me because it's like a lot of these brands are trying to push people into a subscription when they themselves don't have subscriptions. And so for me, I often ask them like, what does that tell you? What that tells you is it's like, and then like I'm asking like, so like as an entrepreneur, you often like using the recurring revenue brain. But the truth is that with all these brands offering subscriptions now, it's not actually recurring, it's not predictable revenue. It's not the predictable revenue that it used to be, in part because everyone is competing to get you into their subscription program. And the second thing, which you mentioned, was you only have like 2 subscriptions. So what ends up happening is like, if you're going to subscribe to something else, you're probably going to cancel one of those other subscriptions. Like by and large, from a budget perspective, given the price of CPG products, like 3 subscriptions is really the most that most people can afford in parallel. And so what ends up happening is there's no loyalty. Like people are just like swapping around. And and I guess this goes into like why we started Rodeo, is like there has to be a better way. Mm-hmm. And I think it starts with recognizing that subscriptions aren't right for all products. There's probably a subscription or recurring revenue piece you can figure out for most products, but maybe the automatic delivery of a product isn't right for all products. I think the second piece there is that, ultimately consumers don't care about subscriptions. What they care about is having the product that they need when they need it. Yeah. And that if you can solve that, like that is the actual job to be done. And so for some people, some households, a subscription where you can theoretically set it and forget it, that will work. Like that's sufficient. And if they get too much of it, it's okay. But if you look at most brands, and it depends on the product they're selling in their industry and whether or not they have like one time and subs or not. But typically what you'll see is around 15% of a brand's customer base is a subscriber. And that might amount to 50% of their gross revenue. Right. But what they have are real challenges around churn. And you'll see that in like their cancellation surveys, where like the number one reason people are canceling is too much product. And so what ends up happening is you have all these people who like your product who are canceling because they're having a bad experience. And when you look at it overall, only 10, 15, even let's call it 20% of your customers subscribe at all. So what about the other 80% of people who are buying from you, but they're actively choosing not to subscribe? What are you doing to we'll call it facilitate or foster like loyalty or great repeat buying experience with them? And I think that's where segmenting your customers and stuff really matters and comes into play, because it's some people want to buy in bulk. Some people, and if you have a garage and you don't live in New York City, that's perfect. Yeah. Some people want to just have more control. And my guess is in the early version of Rodeo was actually before Rodeo, it was back when we were doing One Click Pony. My solution to this was I had a calendar reminder that I had for for a product. And I had a link to the product detail page. Really? Okay. So we're both
it's in my Google
weird
Calendar because I'll forget.
Yeah. It was the same. So that was my solution. Was I had a calendar reminder for all the different products. And then when the reminder would come up, I would think, oh, do I need it or not? And if I didn't, I would just change the date. If I did need it, I'd go and I'd buy more. And so we turned that into a product. And and I describe it as sort of if you think of brands today have two gears. They have we'll call it manual, where the person goes and buys whenever they think of it, or they buy in response to an email, or they're going at 150 miles an hour, which is this auto fulfillment subscription. And sure, you have pauses and skips in there, but by and large, your car is driving at 100 miles an hour and you're asking the customer whose credit card is on file to basically, oh yeah, pay attention and skip it if you notice it, and if you're not so busy with your life, right? Those are good things, but they're not, it's just kind of enabling you to have some sort of control. And then what we have in the middle is what we developed, which is called on demand, where you can shift gears from a normal subscription into on demand, where your card's on file. What we do instead is we send you a reminder, let's say after 30 days, and say, hey, are you ready for more? And you can snooze that, or you can essentially reply yes, and it'll automatically fulfill your order.
Okay.
Right. So it's the same mechanic as a subscription, but you're in full control. That's the difference.
Interesting.
And the idea is that you can shift gears. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, there's so many gears turning in my head right now, because every time people are explaining examples or just different models, I'm always thinking of just myself as a consumer and myself as in this to really put into context. And I'm also thinking when we talked about you asking me about the subscriptions, and I mentioned if it includes TV subscriptions or not, I was thinking about the fact that if you think about, I have an insane amount of subscriptions on TV. It's ridiculous. And no reminders, I just let it go. I just let it keep going. Netflix, Disney Plus, Apple TV, Crave, Amazon Prime. I think that's it. But it's because there's always new content for me to look forward to. And I know it's coming. And I know they're investing time and money to have all these wonderful actors come and do new series. I'm watching Bridgerton right now. I'm having a good time. It's just all in all wonderful, selling Sunset Prime. It's great. But I'm thinking about these other products that I almost dread looking at my credit card statement, because I know I've forgotten a subscription product that I forgot to cancel or something like that. And seeing that charge is really, really painful sometimes. Yeah. And it just makes me I have to go and deal with this. And it's so annoying that it turned me off from subscriptions for a long time, because I was you know what? I know I'm forgetful. I have to put this in my Google Calendar, but they're making me do these extra steps. Like you said, I am not going at 100 miles per hour like that car. And so I like that idea a lot. And I'm curious to know if you have that model or your clients use that model, how does it affect churn rates and retention of their customers? Like, how does that work? And how do you position that for your customers? Because I'm sure, I guess the beautiful balance of subscriptions is understanding the cash flow of consistent revenue and handling churn rates. So how does that affect their churn rates and their retention?
I mean, the funny thing, going back to like, what's the actual predictability of CPG subscription revenue, right? Most brands that, if you're looking at the retention, it's worse between like the first and second, or the first renewal, right? So between the first order and the second order. And so like, I'd argue it's not, maybe in aggregate it's predictable, but what's happening is you're basically burning an enormous amount of money that you spend on customer acquisition on people who are canceling, not because they didn't like your product, but they're canceling because either you gave such a steep discount that they only subscribe for the discount, right? That's a big one. The other one too is that after that initial order, when they need it next, they're probably gonna have a really bad experience, at least within the next 2 renewals. Because if you're slightly off the first time, sure, they might let the renewal go through. But once it renews again, at that point, they might have way too much product, and that's when they probably cancel. Yep. And so what we found, there's sort of 2 ways you can think of on-demand. One of which is it's a ramp that keeps a subscriber essentially active. So a lot of customers, when they're canceling or about to cancel, we do 2 things. We'll call it the passive way to get someone into on-demand, and there's the proactive way. The passive way is, let's say someone's canceling, you can present them, and we present them with the option of, rather than canceling, do you want to go to on-demand where you're in full control, right? You can, as long as you're still buying the product consistently, you can still preserve your subscription discount, but you now have more control over the flexibility. And what's great about that is it's still Pavlovian. It's still reminding the person they've opted into this reminder to see if they need more product. Right. And they're not canceling. And the stats are basically, once someone cancels a subscription, by and large, like things around like 90% of people don't buy again. So once someone cancels for good, like they're gone. That's the moment where a competing brand will come up, because they're no longer sort of in that mindset of buying. And oftentimes they're canceling after a bad experience. Which again goes back to, not everyone who's on a subscription should be on a subscription. Like, you should make it easy for them to buy repeatedly, but maybe the subscription program isn't the right way to do it, or like the auto delivery subscription program. And so what we see around there is about like half of people who are canceling actually stay on to on-demand, right? So those people are, rather than canceling altogether, they're staying on. Their card is still active, and essentially they are still proactively engaged at some extent and still buying. The other side of the spectrum, which is the one I'm also really excited about, is people who don't want to subscribe at all. Because that's, again, that's the majority of any brand's customers. It's like, they'll buy from you, but they're not going to subscribe, right? Like, they're not subscribing because they didn't know about it. They're actively choosing not to subscribe. And so for them, it's like, hey, like, you buy consistently, you're in control. And like, we can show you the segment of your customers who do this. It's like, they obviously want more control, but they want to buy repeatedly. And I think similar to like the story that you gave around, like me, like we use our calendar to log in. It's still kind of a pain, right? Like, it's not, at least I'm in full control, but like what I like about the calendar is it reminds me, right? So it enables me to be in control and be like, yep, I need it or I don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And if I forget about it, like, hopefully I'll check my calendar again. But again, with on-demand, we resolve that by, we proactively just follow up if we don't hear anything.
I love that so much.
And so
it provides me so much relief as a customer.
Well, and then that's what I love to hear, because I part of what like I say is, think about this with your consumer hat. Like, it's a better experience, right? Like, it's and with that, and at a certain level, you have to trust that if your product is good and people want to buy it, they will continue buying it if you make it easy and if you're present when they need your product, right? Like. And I think that becomes like a weird dynamic, though, because sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to give up the predictable revenue. And it gets to our other point. It's like, well, how predictable is it? And truthfully, it's becoming less and less predictable because of all of the realities that we talked about around real world products and replenishment. And now there's all this competition. Like, you're not going to build a great business off of people forgetting that they are subscribed to your product. Yeah. In part because it's not like Amazon or HBO where you forget and shit. Yeah, it shows up in your credit card bill, but you're not ending up with like physical stuff in your apartment that you wasted your money on. With CPG, you get a reminder in the mail that you wasted your money.
Yeah.
And I joke, it's like
a rude reminder, actually.
It's rude. And it's not, and it's like, and I joke is like, I was describing this to someone today. I was like, if you like run out of toilet paper, you blame God. right? I should have bought more. But if a brand automatically charges you for something that you didn't need, you blame the brand because the brand made money off of your money, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like they are clearly in the consumer's mind to blame, even if it's not like, I'm not even assuming that it's not like manipulative or whatever. It's just like they're going to be blamed for it. And that's going to hurt your relationship. Like you were even saying earlier, it's like that brand where you were charged for it when you didn't need it. Like you had a bad taste in your mouth. Right. So I think we're actively creating bad experiences for people at a time where providing a great experience is what helps you stand out and will help you build a sustainable, great business. And you can still do that with recurring revenue with normal subscriptions, but it's about nuance.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great example too, because every single product, the consumption is different. Because even actually probably one of the best examples I've seen is, for the life of me, I can't actually remember the name of this brand. I just saw it a while ago and I was impressed by their model because of my whole fear of subscriptions at this point. But they were actually a menstrual product company. And typically everyone's ordering on a 4-week basis, obviously. Yeah. But some women have different cycles and they have different expectations of when they need this kind of product. And you can't just assume that every woman's going to need this on a 4-week basis every single time. It's just not the way life works. Yeah. And so this brand started out with every month you get this shipment of these menstrual products. And they were seeing like, okay, returns, it was fine. And it was interesting, but it wasn't really taking off until they decided that they should offer a couple of different options depending on when you needed it. And even for someone like myself, I was like, wow, that's awesome. They actually care about when you need this product, because obviously that's a product where you feel supported, you feel encouraged when you receive that kind of product. So that, in my thinking, I was like, that is damn smart, because I think you're even paying more when you order every 6 weeks. But to me, I think I would just pay it, because if it's coming to me at the right time and they know, like, let's say they even know your cycle, like that's pretty great. Yeah. And so if they're working off of your actual consumer trends and obviously understanding not everybody's the same, that to me is brilliant. And I think that is something that keeps people around so much longer. So I really like this idea of on demand, because it's so much like, I genuinely want to pay for this. I want to be a part of this. I'm happy to give you my money for this value. But the idea of being like auto charged or just having too much product is just such a negative experience that just leaves a bad, unscalable taste in my mouth.
I actually love that line, an unscalable taste in my mouth. That's fantastic.
I am always thinking about scale. All right, Ben.
That's awesome. Wait, so I'm curious, like, could you expand upon, so what they did when you said they offered a couple of options, was just, they offered 2 different intervals. They offered monthly or every 6 weeks. Was that the flexibility, or was it something different?
So I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was one time always. They have that as an option if you just want to try the product. But they had every month, every 6 weeks, or choose your own schedule. So
interesting.
You almost crafted your own schedule, because sometimes people have periods of time where there's different like timings around it. So it was like a craft your own schedule, which almost left it up to the user to decide when they wanted to pay, which is kind of cool.
Got it. And I don't mean to pry, but no, obviously as a guy, no, but I guess one of my questions there was like, how often does someone know? Like, so if you were to let me create my own schedule, is it, how much of it is about me knowing ahead of time versus the like it adjusting as maybe my body changes over the course of a year? And forgive me for my for my malady. This conversation took a turn.
Yeah, the listeners are like, wow, I did not expect to learn about menstrual cycles on the podcast today.
Hey, we're keeping it real.
However, shocker. We always have good conversations.
Oh my gosh.
No, but actually, just from my experience and learning from my friends, there's like certain periods of time in your life when you have different cycles. And so it also depends, like some women who are on birth control, the exact day every single month. So it's kind of just easy to tell. But basically their approach to this was just set it for whatever you think makes sense. And then for someone like myself, I know the exact month every single time. So it's just easier that way. But knowing that I have the option to pause not even pause, but just the idea of like setting their own schedule.
Full control over. Yeah.
Full control. Because you do kind of know ahead of time, or you get into like a new pattern with yourself. So a brand that's able to reflect that, in my opinion, absolute genius, because I like to support that, which I think is cool, because then I can recommend to all my friends. Anybody can use it. It's not just people who have the same date every single month. I think it's really smart.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting there even too is like, if I'm thinking as like a designer, what I would want to do, and I'm saying this obviously not as a subject matter expert, so this might be a stupid idea, but it's almost like if you have any subscription to a product like that, I would want to check in with the person. Maybe it's like, we'll call it like a week or two before that. Because with most subscriptions, you check in like 3 days ahead. And really what that's doing is it's just trying to like, are you ready for it? And then also it's like a charismatic way to ask, hey, do you want to include some more things in your purchase? Yeah. But I was going to say, like, with something like that, again, I think the value is in reminding the person so they don't have to actively think of it. Like, as if I was a woman, I would be like, if I were to notice that my body's changing and be like, well, I might not think, oh, I need to change the schedule of my next delivery, right? Yeah. So what I would actually appreciate instead is a reminder, like a couple of weeks before my next delivery, saying, hey, is anything different? And then I'd be like, oh crap. Yeah. I just remembered that I had that, like, yeah. And again, I don't know if 2 weeks is that time or what, but like, I guess in my mind, it's really about, because even when you think about the promise of subscription, it's this idea of set it and forget it. The problem is like real life, like the set it and forget it leads to a bad experience. And so in my mind, it's like the set and forget it, like the best version of it is it knowing when to check in with you. Yes. So that you can as a human just be like, yep, I didn't have to remember it. I didn't have to remember to think about it, but you're reminding me, yes, I needed that. And I can immediately take an action. Exactly.
And I think like with any great brand, because even when I like last year, I was in Colombia for a month working remotely. And awesome. I remember actively thinking to myself, I need to cancel all my subscriptions because I will be so pissed off if I get home from this month away. And it was a very spontaneous trip too. Yeah. And so I remember thinking to myself, but in that time, my TV subscriptions and my Amazon Prime subscription were not even a thought in my head because A, I used Netflix when I was there, obviously. And B, it was one of those things that it wouldn't even think twice because it's always the value add on top. So it's such a good reminder that I guess it's a really good example of the fact that every single product is consumed differently, especially when I assume it comes to CPG products. So it's really interesting. But sorry, go ahead. You're going to say something.
So you made a good point there, which was it's often like the cherry on top too, where it's not the only value you get out of the product. And maybe that was more around Amazon Prime than anything. But I think what I heard you saying was the benefit of the subscription wasn't just that you're getting more product. There was additional benefits on top of that. Is that 100%. Correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I think that goes into more, really it's about membership, which membership doesn't just mean that you're getting membership can mean a lot of different things for different brands, but like even the way that we've thought about and experimented with it is having products that you can only subscribe to if you're a subscriber to any of their products. So it's a membership without calling it a membership. We'd probably benefit from calling it a membership. But I think that to me is really that makes an enormous amount of sense. And that also, and even in those moments where you don't want more product, if you're still getting additional benefits, which is why something like even prepaid subscriptions can be great because like if you're getting free shipping or you're getting whatever, there's still other reasons that you don't want to cancel. And so it's important, regardless of what brand this is, to just really think through how can I provide the best possible experience for my customer? And then how can I avoid all the painful, expensive mistakes of building an unhealthy subscription program? Exactly. Because like, I don't know, everything you just said is like a perfect example. Like you're traveling, you're doing a last minute trip. Yeah. Who in the heck is going to go and figure out all the subscriptions they have for physical products? Like, how would you even do that? I know, but like, how much time? I know. And how would you do? I mean, unless you have it written down, which I have done at various points in my life, or search for managed subscription in your inbox, and then you can find all of your emails. Yeah. But like, now they actually have services. I'm sure you've seen it to proactively identify and cancel subscriptions.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's been around. It was actually an early business idea of mine, like 9 years ago.
It's really the space, man.
Well, I can't take credit for it. I built it for myself, and I actually did execute it. I called it Sassy Dash for managing all my SaaS subscriptions. I feel like
your next business should be coming up with fun, creative names for all businesses because you're really killing it. Strawberry Man, Sassy Dash, Rodeo.
Yeah, and it was One Click Pony before this. And my own website's Skinny and Bald because I'm kind of skinny, kind of bald. So I think I'm mostly bald today.
That's so funny.
No, but like I do, going back to like the hip hop and freestyle stuff, like I guess in a funny way, this brings it all together. Like in my mind, like that's what a lot of this is. It's like, how can you solve boring problems in like sort of unexpected fun ways?
I love that.
And going back to like subscriptions and recurring revenue, like there are happy mediums where brands can get what they want, which is we'll call it predictable revenue. They want as much money as they can, let's be honest, but in a way where they're also delivering like the feel good stuff that also matters. Because if you're building a business that's just making money, but you're pissing off every customer, I mean, I guess that'd be freecreditreport.com. I don't know how much they're worth. But like I know most of the entrepreneurs I know have built D2C brands. They're not just doing it for the money. There's much easier ways to make money than to build a D2C company. They are doing it because they want to build something that creates value. And so I think there's an important alignment there that if you believe in your product, you need to invest in sort of exploring alternative ways to make it easy for people to buy the way they want to buy it when they want it. So that you don't, so that you feel safe. we're to say, I feel safe buying or subscribing or opting into something.
It's a good choice of word, to be quite honest. But
really?
And so I'm curious to know, like, with all of this, because if you've seen like a common theme across our conversation, it's so unique to the type of product, to the type of service, to the consumer that you're targeting. Like there's so many nuances to all this, which I'm sure you've seen time and time again with your customers. So let's say for the listeners who are business owners trying to either scale their brand, starting a new product, or trying to figure out subscriptions for themselves, what do you think are the most efficient or the best practices with increasing revenue with subscriptions? If they decide that, yes, our product is fit for something like this, we're going to go the on-demand route, because after hearing this episode, I'm sure tons of people are going to go right to your website. But what are some of the best practices or things that they should be looking out for when they're trying to increase revenue in a actually sustainable or scalable way?
Yeah. Well, and I think the first one that you even said, which was, I'm reading between the lines, but like talking about on demand, I think it's not you can create relatively predictable revenue, not by automatically charging everyone every single month, but instead by having a larger pool of people who are buying, maybe not every 30 days, but maybe some people are buying it 40 days, some people are buying it 55 days, but making it in a way where it's like almost a risk-free offer, where you're asking the person, hey, are you ready? As opposed to it being this sort of commitment where a lot of people are simply not going to opt into it because they don't, like you. It's like we've all been burnt as consumers with bad subscription experiences.
Yeah.
Like that's just the reality. That's the new reality. I think so that's one piece of it, is just recognizing that a single traditional subscription is not going to cut it. I'd say the other low-hanging fruit, and I like to think of things in terms of unlocks. Like subscriptions, when they first came out, were an unlock for businesses to generate a lot more money than they were before when they're doing one-times. Post-purchase upsells were another unlock. Like retargeting with ads was another unlock. Like there are a number of like products that have come out that have unlocked new ways to create revenue as a brand. And so a lot of it's about looking at like what's your stage of your business and what are the unlocks that are relevant that you haven't done yet, right? Like we think of user generated content, that's an unlock. Testimonials, that's another unlock. Not all of these are like productized per se, but like they have a huge impact on conversion rate. They have a huge impact on like referrals, right? Like loyalty programs. The problem is that a lot of these things, once they're done, they get done like ad nauseum. And they become really annoying and not thoughtful. So I was going to say another one was thinking about the value that you're incorporating into your subscription offer. And what I would encourage everyone to do is to think around like, how can I frame this in a way where there are benefits on top of just the delivery of the product, whether that's through a digital product. Like I've seen like cookbooks incorporated that are they're just emailed. They're not actually even like sent, like physically sent. Other ones are products that you can only buy if you're a subscriber or you get some sort of like steeper discount. So experimenting with things like that can be a great way. Having partnerships with other brands where like your subscribers get a discount that only works with that one brand can be a cool one. Another piece that I would just in general warn people about is being really careful around how much they're discounting their product. Because one of the problems that we see, especially with unhealthy subscription programs, is a lot of when you're discounting a product more than, let's say 20%, I'd say more than 15%, you're attracting people who just are buying for the discount. Even if they don't want to subscribe, like they just don't want to pay full price because they're like, why would I know I can cancel, hopefully. But it's like, why would I spend 20% more for a product that's being marketed? And so that's why it's actually really important to lead with the value. And like, if you look at Amazon Subscribe and Save, you save 5%. You save 5 to 10% on Amazon Subscribe and Save. You're saving like 20 cents. Like Amazon's not using the discount as a actual real motivator to subscribe. They're really focused on the convenience.
Volume.
And the volume for sure. But like, and they do have some things where like, if think you can unlock higher discounts with consistent purchases, which is something that we play around with, where like the longer you're a subscriber, the deeper your discount, to reward loyalty. But being really careful. And so I would say for most brands, like make sure your subscription, it varies. So like, don't take this as like the truth, but like the holy grail, like, but be mindful and test, like offer it for like, but I would say in general, don't offer more than 20% off. Because even at 20% off, like it's a pretty steep discount. And what you're doing is you're giving that discount. You're basically cutting into your margins for people who are only going to buy from you once. And they're only buying from you because you've made it so attractive. So yes, you are acquiring more subscribers, but your churn is going to increase and you're going to have an unhealthier business with worse margins. So that's just something to
devalues the whole product in of itself.
Correct. Yes. It's like your product should be so good that people will pay for it full price. And the value of a subscription is the convenience, or it's the other layers of value that we talked about, like a digital product or whatever. But like, again, the real, the reason the motivator for most of us is like, we want to subscribe, so we don't have to think about it. Exactly. Yes, the discount's nice, but that's not the reason I'm buying, trying to think of a good example of like goldfish for an entire year. It's not to save 20%.
But I like the way that you put that, honestly, because it kind of ties together everything you said throughout the episode as well, which is really focused around the fact that subscription is not the answer to increasing revenue. Rather, it's a value add on top of what you're currently doing. Like it's not the, what do you call it? Like the cash cow version or the Band-Aid version or the thing that gets you to that. It's the value add on top of that. Because I think sometimes people at these, like, think of these like get rich quick schemes. And so people think of like drop shipping and random stuff like that, but subscription should not be molded into all of that. It should be an actual aspect, like value creation in a business model. So I think that's really interesting to note. You know what
that reminds me of? It's like kind of like sprinkling AI right now, where like anyone, but like in all seriousness, anyone can get away with saying AI right now. Like we are in a moment of time for as much enormous value is being unlocked with AI. I am now seeing it applied in the stupidest ways. They don't actually create any value whatsoever beyond the fact that they're saying AI, right? Yeah. And I think this goes back to subscription, where subscription, when it first was introduced, was like, man, this is actually really powerful and this is awesome. And people don't have to think about it and it's great. And now it's just been like, overused and like people have bad experiences, which is inevitably is going to be what happened with AI. It kind of happened with blockchain. I mean, I think we're still,
these things get saturated.
I'm long crypto, but like this is like with anything, right? Like these are unlocks. They open up new possibilities, and then everyone overuses them, and then people go and have to find the next thing. And so, what I would say is for most people is like, make sure, like, don't just play the playbook that you see everyone else doing, because subscriptions are already here. Like, keep an eye out and like be thoughtful around what are things that are going to help provide a better experience. Oh, sorry. One other thing you'd asked around was like other ways for brands to make more money. I don't know if this was just for subscriptions, but it actually is a good example of subscriptions. Is the way that CPG brands make more money is introducing new SKUs. Like it's the oldest game in the book. And I know that I think there was a moment where people were wondering if in D2C you could survive and like build a thriving business just with subscription and like a couple SKUs. And I think I've seen enough brands now, and I've spoken to enough operators where I think I'm not going to, obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but I think that what I have seen work over and over again is having lots and lots of SKUs. And I think, there's even brands like Avi that have done a great job of doing drops that are collaborations with their customer base, right? So actually including their customers into what their next product is going to be, which again, in of itself is a subscription membership experience. And so anyways, I love jamming on this stuff. So I will say, if anyone's playing around with this, I'm happy to talk about it and how like ways it may or may not apply to your own business.
I really enjoy that, because I think it's the interesting aspect is there's not one right answer, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you find that with all the brands you work with. I'm sure you find that there's no like one solidified strategy or one size fits all, which I think is the most interesting aspect about it. And I know a bunch of users will be on their way to your site, which I was going to say, tell me who your customers are, because I want to be an on-demand customer. Meaning I want to be a user of your customer. I like the on-demand idea.
That's awesome. But yeah, absolutely.
Please do tell me. I'm serious.
I'll send you a list.
Subscriptions.
We got you covered.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say one last analogy. I love how I don't think I've ever brought up so many like analogies in a conversation before, but like I was talking to my business partner before this call, and part of what we've been looking at is like, what are ways to describe what's happened with subscriptions? And he had the most amazing one right before you and I talked, which was, he's like, it's like everyone thinks the subscription business model. It's like, what do I say? Like, why does everyone's business model now look like the Leaning Tower of Pisa? That's what he was saying. He's like, it's a beautiful tower. It's functional, but it wasn't built on good foundation. And right now we get to look at this thing and it's lopsided, not because it wasn't a great piece of architecture, but it wasn't built like with a good foundation. He said that and I was like, man, that's like weirdly deep and definitely
he just dropped the most insightful wisdom bomb of all time on a Tuesday afternoon. What the?
I know. But it is funny because it's
very true though.
Like even when I thought about like how to explain this to people, it's like, I'm not saying don't do subscriptions. It really is. It's a great idea, but like overdone, it's going to fall over. And we're at that point now where people are just like figuring out how to maximize all of their subscribers into subscriptions or all their customers into subscriptions when in fact that might not be the right move.
No, I think that's really interesting. And also something like what you're doing is an innovative approach to fix that, because now it's become too overdone, too saturated, where it needs something different, where it actually does present brands an opportunity to do something different and actually stand out from the rest, which is really exciting. But that's a good analogy. And your co-founder is quite insightful for a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, I'll let him know you said
get my next coffee going, trying to get the afternoon going for myself. This guy just got analogies on analogies.
No. Yeah, he's really, really, really smart. It's awesome.
That is awesome.
Hence why I business married him.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end it on a couple very quick questions because we always end our episodes on lightning round. And it's one of my favorite things ever. Our team comes up with phenomenal questions. So I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions and then we'll close it out. So lightning round question number 1. If you could describe your approach to customer retention in just 3 words, what would they be? It's a real thinker, isn't it?
I'm trying to think in 3 words.
Pizza. No, I'm kidding.
Leaning Tower Pizza. That is actually funny.
I hope not.
No. I think it's like proactively. I'm not gonna do the 3-word thing. I just can't think of 3 words. But it's like expert service, and by that I mean like the purpose of a company is to serve their customers, but they can't tell you they'll tell you what they want. They'll tell you what they think they need. But oftentimes with a lot of things like, we're the experts. We're not an expert in the person's business, but we're the experts in that. We have the benefit of a lot of pattern matching and having worked with a lot of brands over the years. And so that would be it. It's like, yeah.
Love that. Nice job.
Expert service.
And
still
not
in 2 words.
Tower Pizza. You're so efficient. You only chose 2 words. You didn't need
there we go.
To be able to do so. Okay. Second question is, who would you say has mastered the art of marketing? And it doesn't have to be a marketer. It could be an artist or an athlete or a celebrity, anyone. I'm hitting you with all the hard questions today.
Not hard. There's a lot of really good marketers. I'm just trying to think of, he's having a moment right now. And I'm going to say it, even though I think it's cliche, but Alex Hormozy, I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure if you haven't, he has a great book called $100 Million Offers. He's everywhere on the internet. He's a pretty ripped guy. I'm sure you've seen him on Instagram, but his content is exceptional, which is part of his content strategy, right? See how that works? No, he's just really, really wise. And I've learned a lot just by reading his material, reading his book. He has a bunch of videos, and then even on his YouTube, Instagram, whatever, he's everywhere. Yeah, make sure you check him out, Alex Hormozy.
I definitely will.
He shares a lot of really thoughtful stuff that's, I'd say, some of it is very tactical that you can actually apply.
Nice.
Without further context. Yeah.
Okay. I will definitely check that out. And I'm sure whichever listeners
Who are yours?
You will.
What are your 2 answers to those 2? Those 2 questions.
That's a tough one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. No one ever asked me that question.
3 words. You have 3 words.
When my team writes these questions, it's for the experts to answer, not for me to answer.
This is how every brand ends up selling subscriptions until they have to subscribe. No,
I'm kidding.
So what are your answers? There you go.
No, I'm kidding. I love subscriptions. Okay. Describe my approach to customer retention in 3 words.
Yeah.
That's a tough go. Experience, surprise, and delight. Because I think every time I'm working with Game Ball customers, obviously it's a little bit more like B2B to C, but every time I'm working with Game Ball customers, the main goal of what we're trying to do when we come up with a loyalty program or a retention strategy for them is really focused around how they can delight and surprise their customers with good experiences, keep them coming back for more, all that. So yeah, that's my answer for
I
the
love
first
that.
one.
That was a great answer. That was better than mine. I want to borrow yours.
I don't think so.
Can we swap?
Yes, Ben said it. If you're
right, second one.
Just came in with a different voice, slightly different voice. Second one, someone who has mastered the art of marketing. Actually, the name that popped into my head when you were talking about Alex Hormozi, was Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you know.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I've just seen everything you said about Alex is what I think about Naval. And I love his approach to life. I have the very same mindset of just whatever you put out there comes back to you, and just the whole positive, optimistic view on things. So I really do like his stuff. And he's a very successful person, obviously.
Yeah.
And he's the first person I think of when I think of someone who's mastered the art of like personal branding and success in marketing. But now back to you with the last and final question is, which brand would you love to take over their subscription model for a year?
Well, it'd have to be for more than a year. Don't work with them for life. You know, what's funny? I would say, I don't know if Alex has any of his brands. I think they're mostly gym brands.
You are all about Team Alex.
I mean, hey, I love working with exceptional marketers. I think that is where I, coming from the technical side, like what I really enjoy is combining business and technology and working with people who are just like so exceptional at what they do. Let me give you another one. All right. So if Alex doesn't have a subscription product, I know who should. Harry Mack. You know who he is? He's all over the internet. Okay. He's a freestyle rapper on Omegle. Yeah. I love him not even saying CPG brands right now. I guess, but he is one of the most talented freestyle artists I've ever seen. And it's kind of like when you see someone who's so exceptional at what they do, it just like is inspiring. And so he's one of those people where I'm like, we could come up with any product. It would be amazing. And so Harry Mack. So I know I'm just like free marketing for these people. But okay, let me give you an actual CPG brand. I think they should be.
No, that's good. That's the whole point of lightning round. It has to be prompt, spontaneous, whatever the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay, perfect. I wrote that down as well. All right. With that, we will close off. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the episode today. It was lovely having you. And I'm so excited to hear what people have to say about this episode, because we covered so many topics. So much. All the analogies. So much territory. Yeah. Birds and the bees, everything. Literally everything. Everything. Awesome. You come to a retention podcast, you don't expect to hear everything. So here we go. Always surprising. Hopefully we retained you. You stayed. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was awesome to have you on. All right. Take care. All right. See ya.